ambiance. So this is James, the mastermind behind this channel, Macabre Manscape. I know it's been a long while. I don't think I've actually posted anything for more than a month. Yeah, I just kind of let the channel get away from me. And if you're wondering why this looks shitty, it's because it's been so long and I want to get this done and out. So I'm filming on my laptop camera. And as it turns out, if you record with this microphone using the actual camera and or audio equipment like app that came with the computer, it sounds better than what I was doing, which was actually using something that was designed for audio, and that apparently sucks ass. It would be really ironic if that audio bit sucked. Anyways, I have all of February in review for Les Nouvelles Sorties, the new releases of February. I've listened to them all. Finally, I was kind of not in the mood to listen to music for the last or so month. So I finally got around to it. And I have my notes. Let's just jump into it. The first thing I listened to, this is the week of February 4th, 2022, was Carpe Diem by Saxon. This was released by Silver Lining Music. And of course, Saxon is one of those really old heavy metal bands. In fact, I chose them because last year I kind of got a little bit into like Dio and Doro, and that sparked interest in some 80s heavy metal in me, which is something that I've never had. Right? So Saxon it was, because it was a convenient release. And let me tell you, it sounds like 80s nostalgia. It could have been released in like 1989. It literally just sounds straight from the 80s, which I'm sure if you're into this stuff, great. For me, I mean, I enjoyed it. It did do what I wanted it to, which is, get me interested in some Saxon. I don't think this is the best album that they've released, and I don't expect it to be, but it does tell me that there's probably something in their catalog for me. That being said, yeah, it's just really traditional 80s heavy metal for the new age, I guess. Has some nice keys, a little cheesy, which is ideally how, you'd want it. Let me just say, though, the singer apparently is 71 years old. Sounds fucking great. I would not have assumed. He sounds really, really good. Anyways, as you can tell, this is, from more than a month ago, and I'm having a hard time remembering. So I'm trying to piece together some of my oldest opinions based on just the notes that I've taken. So I'm going to just go ahead and say that the best songs were the opening two, and I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. Next up, for the week of February 2nd, 2022, I listened to Metanoia by Persefone. This was released on Napalm Records, and I believe they are from Andorra? Like that little principality in between France and Spain. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's where they're from. And this is prog metal, deathy, from what I remember. This really did not float my boat a lot. I think this is just when it's just trying too hard to be like quirky and brutal and progressive all at the same time. Like whenever they just like fucking play, like just straight no frills, just play, I think it's when it's at its best. I wrote electronic whirring in track 6 annoying, and that's the entire line. Female vocals underutilized, which that I do remember. Not that the main vocalist was bad. It's just there are some guest vocals, and I feel like they could be used a little bit more and add a little bit more personality to the music. Yeah, so if you're wondering what I think of the actual songwriting, I said that the best material are the instrumental songs. So take that how you will. 6 out of 10. The third album that I listened to for the week of February 4th, yes, was Mystic Circle by Mystic Circle. This was released on Atomic Fire Records. Now, I was actually excited for this because Mystic Circle is a German, I believe, melodic black metal band, and I've known about them for a long time. They don't seem very popular in black metal circles, and that makes sense, especially because, so, last fall, I was lying in bed, not quite wanting to go to sleep yet, and kind of in the mood for some black metal, which is something that is like I rarely am. So I pulled up some of the more cheesy bands that I know that people don't love so much, and I really enjoyed what I heard by Mystic Circle. So I was really excited to hear what they were cooking. And so from what I listened to it, and I came to the conclusion that this is a kind of baby's first melodic black metal. Like it doesn't really have that much personality, but once it picks up a little bit in the later songs, that's when the material's at its best. There's like nice melodic guitar work. That's a little memorable. There's some like fun little things thrown in, like some, I believe, strings and like a theremin at the beginning of track 4. A little note about track 4, though. I believe track 4. The year 1676 is not medieval, is not Dark Ages, like even a little. So maybe they should hire an editor. I will say, here's a little tidbit that I remember finding really charming. So they do this thing where it's like pitch down black metal talk downs. And I love that shit. It's just so nostalgic for me. Like a lot of early Cradle and like Dismal Euphony from the 90s. A lot of those bands did a lot of that. So it's like, to me, it's like old school gothic and black metal bands will do those like pitch shifted down talk throughs in their songs, and I just think that's charming, and I like that. Yeah, so in general, I think it didn't have super like a lot of personality, but whenever it was at its best, it was good. So I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10. We are moving on to the week of February 11th, 2022, Scar Weaver by Once Human. Now, I chose this band because they've been suggested to me on Amazon and on YouTube pretty much nonstop for the last couple of years, and I've never once had any interest in looking into them. But you know what? I did this time. And let me tell you, it's groove metal. Like, that's all I have to say about it, really. Like, it's, if you're not totally enamored with the idea, with the genre, with the delivery of groove metal, this isn't really going to be for you. Where it's like, sure, it's heavy and groovy, but that's about it. I just typically find the concept of groove metal to be artistically stifling to some extent. Not saying that this is bad. There's some songs in here that I really enjoyed. For example, I liked the 9th track called Rival. That was really good. The thing is, on the surface of it, everything is fine. Like, the playing is technically competent. I really like the guitar tone. The growls and the clean singing are good. I will say that I think the clean singing I think it'd be better off if they chose something less gritty, because it's like really chesty and gritty for the clean vocals. And if they did something like higher and clean, maybe it would work better to like break up the one note that is like most groove metal in my experience. Because at this point, it's all low end and there's not much high end, so it sounds incomplete. And that's why I gave this a 6 out of 10. So I listened to, I believe, 4 or 5 albums in this week, February 11th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I listened to 5 albums for February 11th, not because that was part of the plan, but just because there were so many releases by, I feel like, major artists that were coming out that week that I just kind of had to make an exception for my original plan of doing 2 or 3. The next thing I listened to was the debut album by Shield of Wings, their album Unfinished. This is released on, I wrote it down, Elder Path Records. And this band is an American symphonic gothic metal band. And they released an EP, their debut EP, about 10 years ago. I assume this is a case like the same thing with Mystic Circle, who broke up and reformed and put out an album. I believe this is one of those cases where during the pandemic, when they're trapped inside and need something to do, they decide to revive their old musical projects and get really passionate about them. And I will say that in general, I really liked this on the surface. I will say that the mixing is whack. Like, I think the keyboard choirs take up way too much space. But in general, I do like the songwriting, and there's also some nice folk elements and some cool like vocal effects used by the main singer or like one of the singers. So the main singer is, I believe, more of a contralto vocal range, but with a very well developed range. Not the most refined voice, but in general, like a very effective singer. This album really reminded me of like early mid 2000s, maybe Within Temptation, mixed with something a little bit more uh, aggressive. Maybe like Surenia, or maybe even Imperia. I couldn't really tell you. It just gave me those specific vibes about it. Yeah, I liked this. I think it wasn't amazing, but in general, I'm in. I'm curious to see if this band does anything else in the future, and if they do, I'd be totally willing to hear it. For this one, I am going to give it a 7 out of 10, mostly because the mixing was just so weird. Third album I listened to in the week of February 11th, 2022 was Halo by Amorphis. This was released like the Mystic Circle album on Atomic Fire. And I guess call me naive, the first thing that stuck out to me was the harsh vocals. And I assumed that Amorphis was kind of like a band, kind of like Anathema or the not the Agonist, or the Gathering, where they kind of ditched that after releasing their few like death metal-y albums. Apparently I was wrong. That immediately stuck out to me. So I liked it though. Like I think the cleans are really nice. The vocal performance was like the first thing that I noticed. So it's the growls and the clean vocals, which are both really nice. The problem is that the songs are a bit formulaic, where they have that like chunky riff with growls, not much else going on during the verses, and then you go into a clean, kind of more epic sounding chorus. Um, not to say that that's like the only thing going on, because there's, similar to the last album I talked about, there's like organs and folk instrumentation, just some other stuff that breaks up the monotony, I guess. So there's some like Middle Eastern stuff, some riffs that maybe think of power metal or melodic death metal. I will say though, we've outgrown the need for acoustic guitars in most music. We don't need acoustic guitars. That's like my one like really main criticism about listening to this album, is just like, please no more acoustic guitar. I can't. But yeah, in general, I really liked this. Something I have noticed with listening to these releases is that a certain guitar tone is becoming really popular, and that would be like the really not solid sounding, like a little bit more wishy-washy, and it's really not a tone that I particularly enjoy. But I will say it didn't bother me so much here. It's just proggy, symphonic, folky, power metal-y. It's really good, I have to admit. So I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. I actually have a copy of this next one, but I left it on the other side of the room, and I'm not willing to get up. So, this is The Long Road North by Cult of Luna. This was released on Metal Blade, and I did not know what to expect. I assumed, based on like the name Cult of Luna, I was expecting a black metal band, and that's not what this is at all. This is like atmospheric post metal, and that, I think I like the idea of it, but every single time I've ever tried to listen to post metal, it usually doesn't go my way. But I have to admit, this band on this album specifically, the attention to detail, atmosphere, and detail that that they craft here is so good. I think in general the album is a little uneven. Loved the first four songs, and then there's that kind of bit in the middle that kind of bores me a little bit, and then it kind of picks up again towards the end, but it doesn't ever like reach back to the heights of those first four songs. So that's like Cold Burn, The Silver Arc, Beyond One, I'm sorry, and An Offering to the Wild, and those four tracks together are phenomenal. In fact, I bought the album based on those four tracks alone. It's like heavy and chaotic and like really spacey and just cold and dark. And the aesthetic that they use for the album in the booklet is a snowy kind of tundra aesthetic, but I was thinking of something a lot just grimmer, cosmic maybe, just something unsettling. We'll say that the vocals, the kind of screaming feels more like Fry, and that really high compression that I don't necessarily think is great, but it doesn't bother me. By the end of it, I was like used to it. But I think the highlight here is the instrumentation. So there's like Rhodes pianos, I assume, and they have a guest saxophonist and something that sounds like a vibraphone, or that's just cool. And there's some like atonal strings and sirens and stuff. It's cool. I kind of wish I loved the album more, but again, those first four songs, loved those. So I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10. This band I've heard a lot about on heavy metal YouTube. They seem to be really popular, and that is this band Voivod. And I don't know what I was expecting. I think Marty Worm talks about them a lot, and I was like, he gasses them up a lot, and I was expecting something like really thrashy and aggressive, but also proggy and off the wall. And what I got was progressive new metal ghost. That's what I got. 4 out of 10. Okay, I guess I should explain why. Mostly, I don't like the guitar tone. Very wishy-washy. Doesn't have enough humph. There's a lot of empty space in the riffs, and I don't care for it. It reminds me of like Matter Mortem, and like it's nothing that I haven't heard before. Like I've tried getting into certain bands. Like Matter Mortem is good. Matter Mortem is a good band. I like them, but a lot of bands similar to them I just can't jive with them. I think the goofy shit is the stuff that I was most into with this album. Uh, yeah, I don't know. This entire album just kind of has same face syndrome, which for those of you not in the know is when people draw characters and people with faces, and all the characters, if you removed the hair and the clothing, look the same, like they have the same face, identical faces, and the only thing that builds the character aesthetically is other signifiers, like hair color and just color in general, hair design, stuff like that. Yeah, this was really repetitive. Didn't I just didn't really care for it. Not for me. So 4 out of 10. The week of February 18, I listened to two or three. One, two, three. Three albums. The first one being Crusade of Bards' second album, Tales of the Seven Seas. This was released on Rock Shots Records. And this is a Spanish symphonic metal band. And they're kind of a little folky, but the thing that struck me most was that they come across more like a poor man's Visions of Atlantis, who themselves got big being the poor man's Nightwish. So they kind of are a little bit of a knockoff with, a little bit of a pirate, seafaring theme, which is something that I don't really care for. But in general, it doesn't really affect the music. I enjoyed the songwriting for the most part. I think the weakest parts are the openers and the closers, but the middle is pretty decent. It's cheesy, and that is what I'm here for. That is like where this band excels. It has even like a little bit of a Eurovision or a Disney vibe. So I was all for that. It has a little bit of a folk instrumentation, but the mix is kind of, also out of whack. I also don't like the drum tone. That's the first thing that stuck out to me. Just the drum tone sound is just not for me. But, I actually have resolved into like, I think I'm going to get this album. And so I'm giving this one a 6 out of 10. So like 6 is a weird number because it can mean something that I really, really like, but I can't overlook all of its flaws. And it's like, cheesiness and just in general, like it's something that I admit isn't necessarily good, but I love it. Or it can be something that's completely just like middle of the road, like is competent, but just bores me and just not that engaging. Next thing I listened to that week was Revel in Time by Star One. This was released on Inside Out Music, and they are a Dutch progressive metal project. This is, I believe, an Adrian Lucassen project who's done a lot of progressive metal, bands and projects and stuff in the 90s and 2000s and stuff. So he's fine. He seemed like a cool dude. I almost never like any of his projects. Like I love the band Stream of Passion, but when they released their first album and he wrote a lot of the music on it, I did not care for that. So this is really like fun and heavy progressive metal. Like on the face of it, it's like a really traditional heavy metal structure with, that orchestral and like sci-fi spacey electronic influences over it. So I understand why people would love this. It has, again, it has the like great vocal performances, and it does throw back to like some 80s heavy metal, but I just don't care for all the frills on this album. And that's from someone who likes music with a lot of frills. I don't care for no frills. I want frills. I want all the shit. I want the icing on the cake. If music was a cake, I want all that shit. But in this specific instance, I don't think it works for me. Um, one of my notes is literally just track 4, very 80s throwback sound, but comes off like the kind of song that Jack Black's character in School of Rock would play. So I don't know. If you're into that, sure. But I don't know. It just gave me, it rubbed me the wrong way. So on the face, I have to admit, it's a well put together album. I just didn't care for it. So this is going to be another 6 out of 10. See, that's where I'm talking about that 6 being a weird, deceptive number. The third and last album I listened to for the week of February 18th was Acts of God by Immolation. This was released on Nuclear Blast. And this one, I chose very intentionally in that I've never liked anything that I've ever heard by Immolation. I don't like most death metal. I have liked some of it. I really like a lot of Deicide, and I like Massacre's record. What is it? From Beyond, the one with the Demon Vortex, and then what album? That Dan Swano band that released quite a few albums, but their first output was like death metal. I really like that album. But in general, death metal, not for me. And I've tried several times. I always just come off board. So I chose Immolation because they're pretty popular. They've consistently put out releases, and I was like, I'm gonna find a fucking way into this genre. That's not just those 3 bands that I listed. So not gonna lie, it started off on a really good start. Like the opener, like the intro track, I thought was whatever. Like it doesn't actually lead into the next song, so like what's the point? But tracks 2, 3, and 4 I think are the best songs, and then it ends pretty strong with Let the Darkness In and Apostle, the last song. The thing is, the opening songs have a bit more of a focus on like a really elongated, menacing, like dark riff melodies. Something to like really add atmosphere. And on those songs, I listen to them, I'm like, you know what, this could actually really use like a slight orchestra or a choir, and that would just elevate the effect. It sounds like that kind of music. It is just dark and like looming, and I loved it. And then the rest of the album is just kind of like your normal death metal riffing, and I don't know, it kind of lost me a little. Like, not that it was bad, I still enjoyed it. I just think the riffing wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be for the rest of the album, and the vocal like patterns were just a little bit too repetitive and basic. It doesn't really do anything for me vocally. I kind of wish the vocals by themselves, like the actual sound created by the vocalist, could like stand on its own a little bit more, be a little bit more wah, projected. That's what this is. But yeah, so honestly, I'm kind of torn whether or not I want to pursue this album further, but for now I am going to give it a 7 out of 10. So like pretty decent. It's just I think it built itself up a little bit with those opening songs, and then just kind of left me a little bit cold and disappointed. But not bad by any means. Equinox by Emetropia. This is an independent release, and this is a Swedish symphonic metal band. And here's the thing. This is the 3rd symphonic metal album I'm talking about in this list. And if I'm going to be honest, on the face of it, this is kind of more competent than the other 2 I've mentioned. However, I did not love this. It sounds like I've heard it before, one, but also it's really new. So like when I stopped paying attention to new music in 2015, that time onward, the symphonic metal genre has changed quite a bit. And the country of focus kind of went from the Netherlands and Germany to Italy, and the Italians are, I feel like, if you're not really into like black metal, you probably know them for power metal. And they have a few record labels that are consistently pumping out these like symphonic power metal albums, and it's just not a sound that really works for me. And I, as someone who's listened to this stuff since 2007, kind of have a preconceived notion of what symphonic metal sounds like, of what good symphonic metal sounds like. And this, I listen to it and I go, yes, this is structurally competent. They are skilled musicians. They are a talented bunch of people. It just doesn't click for me. And so if you're a fan of symphonic metal, getting it for the first time today, and this is the kind of stuff that you're more exposed to, I could completely understand why people would love this. People are on Reddit and they are like fronting this band and this album. They are repping, and I understand completely why. It just didn't click for me. So I'm gonna give this a 5 out of 10. And if this band continues, I will keep an ear to the ground and I'll listen to that new thing when it comes out. But as of now, I'm not won over. It's perfectly fine. Honestly, again, it's kind of more competent than both the Shield of Wings album and the Crusade of Bards album. It just didn't click for me. I don't know what to tell you. So, 5 out of 10. Like, it's good. It's just, I can hear that it's good. It is quality. It just didn't do anything for me. Last thing for the month of February. HammerFall, Hammer of Dawn. This was put out by Napalm Records. And I guess I always assumed this band was older than they are. Like, they seem like an 80s band. But no, they are a 90s, I believe Swedish as well, power metal. Yes, heavy/power metal. And I really enjoyed this. Some parts of it do remind me of, like, I guess Iron Maiden a little bit. And I don't know. I was actually, from the word go, really into it. I think, I think they should not do ballads. There's one ballad on this, or two. There's one ballad on it, and it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It was so cheesy. But in general, I really liked it. I guess it's not really what I was expecting when I hear the terms like European power metal. I'm expecting more of that like really nimble pecking guitar riff style that's like very neoclassical inspired. Like it sounds like it's like meant to recreate the sound of like a harpsichord. This isn't like that at all. This is a bit more heavy metal, just straightforward inspired. And the riffing style is a lot more gallopy. Like it's a lot not more basic, isn't exactly what I was going for. It's just less frills. And, not saying that there isn't some great lead work on this album. There really is. But it doesn't feel like that's necessarily the focus or the thing driving the songs. This is like really hook heavy, really catchy, and I don't know, the vocal performance is really cool and great. In general, I think the mix that he's using is really nice sounding, but there's a few times where I hear that and I go, a little bit more compression would be nice on the voice. And I don't mean mixing compression, I mean like physical compression. But yeah, it's a little cheesy, but ultimately just really good, straightforward, catchy power metal. And I kind of really liked this. So I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. And with that, it brings us to the end of February. 10 days too late. But I am going to be listening to the new March releases this weekend. So hopefully I can get caught up before I have to start a new job on Monday. So hopefully I, don't leave for too long. Hopefully this sounds okay. I really don't want to record this again. And I'm sorry that, it probably looks like shit. I'm recording this on my laptop, which is probably already like dying. It's deteriorating as we speak. I need to get a new one. But yeah, so thanks for watching. Click like, subscribe. You can find me on Twitter in the description. Should I start posting on Instagram for like the 2 people that like actually watch my stuff? I might just post pictures of music. But yeah, so thanks for watching. That's my February in review.